Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's a longtime White Sox beat writer for MLB.com and a BBWAA member. Please welcome Scott Merkin to the program. Scott, it's great to have you on. How are you?
Good. How are you, John?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being here. What's the vibe at Sox camp right now?
You know, it's interesting because I think fans are wont to do, are a little concerned because the team, as we talk, is 1-6-3, I think. But it matters not. You know, first of all, some of those games are 5 innings, some of those games are 6 innings, some of those games are 7 innings. I think just one time did they use close to the projected opening day lineup, and that had LaCroix in there instead of Grandal, who's nursing a knee injury. And, Dylan Cease hasn't pitched yet. Carlos Rodon hasn't started yet, although Ronaldo Lopez looked great in his one start. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. I think if, they come down to the last 2 days of spring training or last 4 or 5 and they have like 2 wins, you may want to say, okay, these don't count, but it'd be good to win a few before going into the season if we have, that high, if they have that high an aspiration. We as in the fan base, want to see a championship. But again, I think it's a good vibe. People really seem to like what Tony La Russa brings to the table. And that's not, saying anything against Ricky Renteria, I think did a good job too, but it's just kind of a different thing. They said, very detail oriented. I had a chance to talk to Tony last Friday, and just, a lot of preparation, a lot of focus on the fundamentals. And if you can do those over and over, you can take them into the game, and that can help you win a little bit. So I just think, it's a good mix so far. And I think, before all is said and done out here in Arizona, they would like a few wins.
How often do the playoffs come up in daily talks?
I mean, we ask, not really much now. I think like maybe the first couple of days when you were kind of doing like the intro interviews when, it's just basically workouts and there's no games or anything. So I don't think now, like, there isn't much question about, Lucas, you threw 2 innings today. Do you think your team has a chance to win the World Series or something like that? But it may come up in the context of an interview, but maybe some one-on-ones. It's been a big focus, though. And I mean, let's be honest. If this team does not make the playoffs, last year I think if they didn't make the playoffs, it would have been a little bit of a surprise, but it wouldn't have been a crushing disappointment. If they don't make it this year, it's a disappointment. There's no way around it. Now, if they don't win the championship or win the AL, that's okay. You go on to the next year. It's still building. But if they fall short of the playoffs somehow, even with the playoffs back apparently to 5 teams on each side, it's going to be tough. That's for sure. I mean, that is their goal without a doubt.
Scott Merkin here on Sports Talk Chicago. Scott, who's the 5th starter going to be right now?
Well, it's interesting. I think it's Carlos Rodon. I think, they signed him to the 1-year, $3 million deal to be their 5th starter, I would think. I'm not guessing they gave that money to someone to be a long reliever, but, Lopez, who's made some changes under Ethan Katz, shortened his arm path on delivery, looked very good in the first game. Now, one thing I was just joking about with some people the other day, other writers the other day, they're people too, is, you can't get too caught up in looking great in the spring training or looking awful in spring training because it's just that spring training. I don't think you ever heard Greg Maddux or I'm trying to think of Frank Thomas say, boy, that Cactus League season I had in 1996, it really propelled me into the Hall of Fame, So, but Lopez just looked like a different guy, and he's always had that confidence. So let's put it this way. I think Rodon breaks at 5, but I don't think it's like a given that he's going to get 25, 30 starts for the year because you have a lot of other options. You have Lopez, who I think will start as a reliever. You have Kopech, who is starting as a reliever, but is going to be worked up, have his innings extended out, because they plan for him to be a starter in the future. You have Stever behind him. You have Jimmy Lambert behind him. So there are some options. So we've not seen Rodon in a Cactus League game as of yet. There's still today's the 10th, so there's basically 3 weeks left, a little under 3 weeks left of spring training. So there's still plenty of games to play. There's one other day off for the team before they break camp. So still 20-some games, 19 games to play. Plenty of time to get 4 starts, right, for him. So we'll see a little more then, but I would think he's pretty much 5, Cease is 4, Giolito, Keuchel, Lynn in that order. And then you have, Lopez, Kopech, Stever, and Lambert kind of waiting in the wings, ready to go.
What's your expectation for Rodon? I know injuries have been an issue before. The Sox re-signed him. What do you think he's going to do this year?
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say. I mean, he was non-tendered at first, but they brought him back, and it was a good fit for him. He knows the organization. His family knows the organization. He's pitched here. He's had some good moments here. He's a very talented pitcher. He was number 3 in the draft for a reason. It wasn't like, he was some project they drafted and they hoped he'd develop. He was, a great prospect coming out of college. And this is last year before free agency. And, I think, that influences everyone, right? And not that he wasn't trying before that, but I mean, he has had some injuries. So I think the number one thing for him is stay healthy and then just see what kind of consistency you can find to go with the, the great stuff he has. And, again, not taking anything away from Don Cooper, who did this so well for so many years as pitching coach, but the teachings of Ethan Katz as a new pitching coach really seem to be resonating so far, and we'll see if it reaches out to Carlos Rodon as well. But he's a tough competitor. He really is. He's a tough competitor. One of the better sliders you'll find, and just a good pitcher overall. Just I think injuries and a little bit of inconsistency here and there have sapped him from kind of being that number one guy they might have, number one or number two guy they thought when they drafted him.
Let me ask you this: is a 6-man rotation possible? Knowing about all these options right now.
I don't think so. I don't think teams in contention and teams with veterans like Keuchel and Lynn, and even Giolito at this point, this is what Giolito's fourth season starting. They're just too much a creature of habit where they have, the 4 days set in between starts, know what they're doing. And I remember like in 06, Kenny Williams had talked about this a number of times, that 05, all his starters threw not only so many innings, but so many high leverage innings that he wanted to start the season with a 6-man rotation. Remember, they still had Brandon McCarthy at that point.
Right.
And the veteran guys just, didn't want to change they didn't have the say, but I think the veteran guys just didn't feel comfortable in that. And unfortunately, in the second half of that season, I think the starting staff wore down a little bit, understandably, from all the innings they threw to win the championship and the tough innings they threw to win the championship. But I've seen a couple younger teams mention that. I've seen it in Twitter from other reporters from MLB.com. I just don't see that happen with the White Sox. I think they go with the 5 starters, but you have options. If someone needs a break for some reason, if someone happens to go on the IL, and that happens every year, I think even that team in 05, which I think used 6 starters the whole year, still used 6 starters and had to go to Brandon McCarthy for 10 starts. So, you'll have options, but I don't see a 6-man rotation.
Scott Merkin here on Sports Talk Chicago. Scott, what other positional battles are you watching right now in Arizona?
Well, there really isn't that much there. I guess the backup catcher spot, because Mercedes has had a good camp, Collins has looked good, Zaghloul has played well behind the plate, but I just don't believe they brought Jonathan Lucroy in to take a flyer on him. I think he was the number 2 guy when they brought him in. They had a really great situation, probably the best catching situation in baseball last year in Grandal as the starter, and James McCann is almost the 1A starter. And Grandal is I think a bigger offensive presence. He's a great pitch framer, but I think that the pitchers from the year before had really grown accustomed to throwing to James McCann and liked throwing to James McCann. Again, not saying they didn't like throwing to Grandal. They just knew McCann a little bit better. So I think you'll have that with Lucroy, only he won't play as much as McCann does. He'll be a kind of a true backup. But in the same sense, you have guys, like Mercedes, like Collins, like Zavala, who you can turn to. And actually, Tony La Russa has been very high on this young catcher, Carlos Perez, who was reassigned yesterday to the minor league minicamp, but, who, could do something in the future too. So I guess the only other spot that would be open would be like, well, okay, I guess it's not a position battle really, but the question is, does Andrew Vaughn break camp with the team, as designated hitter? So let's assume he does, with or without a contract extension. He's your DH to start the year. So then if you go 26 man, assuming 8 relievers, 5 starters, do you go Zach Collins or Mercedes, which leaves you with basically 1 utility infielder in Leory Garcia, along with, the backup catcher, which should be LaCroix and Adam Engel? Or do you go Danny Mendick, where you have a second utility infielder, you can use Leory all over the place, maybe have a little more flexibility. And I would say it's probably more likely to go that way. But things could change. Maybe somehow, some way, they don't take Andrew Vaughn when they break camp. I can't see how that would happen, but especially if you're committed to winning, I don't see how that could happen. And, maybe someone else gets the backup job. Injuries can happen too. But I guess I've given a long kind of mishmash answer that there's no clear-cut battle. There's no, battle where there's okay, player A and player B, and one of them's going to win it and one of them is going to be gone. It's just a question of what if. What if Andrew Vaughn doesn't break camp with the team? What if they take 3 catchers? What if they take a second utility guy? So that's pretty much it. So not really battles, but kind of filling out the roster.
Do you think Vaughn does break camp, and are you concerned about his lack of experience at all?
No, I mean, he's a very, polished player for a young age. And, I've talked to him one-on-one. I've talked to him in a group, and he just seems to kind of get it. I think he's already kind of, one of the things that interests me is he's going to be the DH. And I'm sure Jose will have time there, too. But, I mean, Jose has, Abreu, the reigning MVP, has made it clear that he prefers to play the field, and that will be the case this year. So it's a challenge. We've talked to guys like Adam Dunn and Adam LaRoche and just guys who had really great success when they were playing in the field, even if they weren't, the greatest defensive player ever, and then said it was really tough to adjust to the DH role. But Andrew Vaughn said he's going to kind of view that as like, another position, just that he's got to, stay in the game and just not look at it like, okay, I grounded on my first at bat. I got to wait until the order comes back around until I'm useful again type of thing. He's going to be ready to do, a little bit of everything. So, I think he's going to be able to handle it. He's got a very polished approach to the plate, very advanced approach. Seems to be able to use the whole ballpark. Really good batting eye. Will be a great asset to that lineup.
What about right field? That's going to be Adam Eaton's, right? Or is that going to be kind of a platoon situation?
Well, I think you have the option of platoon. Adam Engel is coming off probably his best overall season as a major leaguer last year. We always knew, especially reinforced by that 1 week where he went over the fence 3 times I think he robbed 2 Yankees players and 1 Cleveland player of a home run. I think Yonder Alonso was one of them. We always knew he was a Gold Glove defensive player, but he really, kind of found his hitting groove last year too. So I think you have the potential that if things go awry, if Eaton struggles against lefties, you could platoon. But I think Adam Eaton is your opening day starter, and Adam Eaton is your everyday player for, at least April and then beyond. So I don't think it's a platoon, but I think it's a great option to have when you have Adam Engel who can play regularly whenever you need him.
Is there anything that still worries you about this team right now?
I mean, I think, Yasmani Grandal has not played in the Cactus League game. Now, I know Yasmani Grandal is a experienced veteran, and he knows exactly probably how much he needs to be ready. Maybe he only needs 7, 8, 9 games of Cactus League play to be ready for the regular season. And, like I said, we still have like 19 games left here. But yeah, you want to see him, get in there at some point soon just to get some action. But again, a minor thing. They've played down that knee injury since it first happened. Just taking it slow. There's no reason to rush him. I'm sure if it was a regular season, it would be a little different. And, just the depth, a lot of the great young players the White Sox have are now major league starters, are now everyday position players. Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, Nick Madrigal, maybe Andrew Vaughn, Lucas Giolito's in the rotation. Lopez is there. Rodon's there. Moncada. How could I forget Moncada too? All these guys are there. So I think, the depth, they have some good young players, but a little less experience. And I think just the biggest thing with this team is just the unknown. You look at Luis Robert, he is a 5-tool talent. He's an incredible athlete, and at the end of August last year, he was probably one of the MVP candidates in the American League.
Right.
And then I think he finished, 8 for 81, something like that in September. So again, you say, okay, the kind of slump every young player goes through. If the season was longer, he probably would have been fine. But you got to see that still. You can't just automatically say, well, he's what he was in August and not in September. Moncada was an MVP candidate. It was maybe their best overall player in 19, and then struggled, albeit with, sadly, what a lot of people struggle with, the after effects of COVID-19 last year, and did not have a good season. He looks healthy. He's running well. He's stealing bases. Looks good in the field. But again, you got to see him go out there and do it and know that, okay, he's back to where he was. That's the real Moncada. So just those kind of things, just see I guess not much the unknown, but just the natural continued development of these great young talents they have on their team.
Scott Merkin, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Scott, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, your favorite Michigan basketball memory is what?
Oh, well, up there has got to be, I have a funny story. It's got to be, one of them has got to be the Jordan Poole 3 to beat Houston.
Okay.
In the tournament, the year they lost, I think they lost to Villanova that year, right? They beat Loyola, much to all of Chicago, except for me, chagrin. And then we're just beaten by a really good Villanova team. But the funny thing was, I tend to get, as people can see on Twitter, pretty neurotic and overreact, as every other fan in the world does with their team. So I had turned that game off, thinking they had lost, thinking there was no way they could come back. And all of a sudden, after Poole hit that, my phone just blew up saying, "Are you happy now? Are you satisfied now? Everything good now?" And I didn't see the shot in real time. But in real time, of course, it was, 89. I still think that Michigan U of I Final Four game has got to be one of the greatest Final Four games in the history of the NCAA tournament. I mean, really amazing. I counted once, and I'm not sure. You'd have to go back and look at this, but I think between the two teams, 13 guys from that game ended up playing some level of NBA basketball.
Wow.
Not necessarily, 10-year careers or whatever, but, you had guys like Sean Higgins and Loy Vaught and Kenny Battle and Kendall Gill and Marcus Liberty. My goodness. Nick Anderson, Mark Hughes, I think, was on that team. Ramil Robinson. So, that was seeing that championship. It was kind of like when Michigan football won in 97. Yeah, it was 97, I think. Yeah, you watch a team your whole life and you're like, okay, they're going to get close. They're just never going to win. But they actually won that year. So that would probably be. And the other one that I thought was pretty amazing was when they won the Big Ten tournament. Oh, geez, like maybe 2017, I think it was, when very sadly their plane skidded off the runway. And, they were lucky just to even get to the tournament the next day. I believe it was the one that was played in Washington, D.C. And I remember they played U of I in like warm-up suits or warm-up shorts and tops because their uniforms were still on the plane and the accident was still being investigated. So, and they went on to win that tournament, and I think they beat Wisconsin to win the championship that year. But that was pretty amazing. So a lot of good memories. Hey, they're every fan you ask could probably come up with like 3 great ones and then 3 where they're like, oh my God, I can't, got to put that like the Cordell Stewart 72-yard tip pass football-wise. Try to forget that one as quickly as I can. The Chris Webber timeout. Try to forget that one as quickly as I can. But those are the good ones that I remember.
What's your expectation for them in this year's tournament?
Don't really know. They unfortunately picked the wrong time to kind of have their worst week of all of the season, up until the U of I game. And U of I is really good. And I knew when U of I was losing early in the year to like Missouri and Maryland, and they went to overtime with Nebraska, that team was going to be better by the end of the year. They have too much talent on that team not to be good. Illinois was supposed to be a top seed this year. Michigan kind of surprised people. Illinois, Baylor, and Gonzaga were all three of the top favorites going into this season from what I read and what I saw. So, yeah, they did not have a great last week. Up until that, their only really bad games were against Oakland University, who they beat in overtime, and then that game Minnesota, when Minnesota was still pretty good. So, again, I think Eli Brooks. I combined Eloy Jimenez and Eli Brooks in one name there. Eli Brooks' health and Franz Wagner's health are going to be huge. If those guys are not at 100%, it's going to be tough. It really is. But I think at the worst, like let's say they lose Friday to whether it's Michigan State or Maryland, the worst they come out of it is a 2 seed. So that at least makes you a pretty clear favorite the first 2 games. And then once you get to, the Sweet 16. Sweet 16. Once you get to the Sweet 16, you take your chances then. Everyone's pretty good at that point, But, even 2 versus 15 and 2 versus 7, if you get that far, you're still a pretty good favorite, and you go from there. So I would say if they get to any less than Elite 8, it would be a little disappointing. But we'll see what happens. Injuries are a big thing at this time of year.
And, Scott, before we finish up today, last question. Is humorful a word?
Well, I put it out there. And I got mixed reactions, and I think it was like the official Scrabble account said they approved it. So humorful from this point on is going to be a word, and hopefully when it's added to the dictionary, it will be C. Scott Merkin. Maybe I don't want it that way. C. Scott Merkin's origin of the word. How about that? And I'll get a little credit for that one there.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining me. Always a pleasure to talk White Sox with you, and best wishes as the season really kicks up here at the end of spring training and in April when everything opens up. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. And, I got to close with the Big Ten tournament, the NCAA tournament going with the Go Blue before I hang up here.